Anybody who's a knife or gun aficionado is very familiar with the excellent Glock pistol. That's a semi-automatic polymer pistol. It's been around since the 80s, and it's an outstanding pistol design. The polymer that Gaston Glock designed is super strong, impervious to the elements, heat resistant. Not going to talk about the Glock pistols in this video. What I am going to talk about are their excellent knives that also utilize this excellent polymer that Glock has developed. Occasionally in the world of knives, actually I shouldn't say occasionally, I should say rarely in the world of knives, we'll come across a knife that delivers a huge amount of performance for a small price. It's hard to find and it's very rare, but the Glock knives deliver this. Specifically, their field knife, model 78, shown here, and their so-called survival knife, model 81, with the saw back on it. Basically the same knife, differentiated only by the saw back. Nicely done catalog page here, gives us the specifics, little bit of the background of the Glock knife. So this is a very high value knife. Here's an example of one right here. This is a model 78 in olive drab Glock knife, and it is an excellent field knife. I would probably term it a field knife just like Glock does, rather than a combat or tactical knife, because it's very purpose built for that type of function, in my opinion, that it can perform a lot of different tasks, and we'll talk about those here in a sec, maybe some limitations of those tasks. First off, what's the background on it? Well, I'm not an expert in a Glock knife, exactly what the background is, but looking at it, common sense would show that it is a bayonet designed knife. Now, if we go back in the history of bayonets, at the turn of the century, actually just before the turn of the century, late 1800s, all bayonets had that triangular cross section. They are long, slender, ground down steel spikes, pretty much triangular in cross section, so they were more resilient to bending, and they were designed, of course, to put on the end of the rifle in bayonet attacks and to stab and pierce. Well, they did that fine, however they were very limited. They could only do that task. Then they switched to the sword bayonets, which were prevalent during World War I, and these were long knife bladed looking swords, which were great for bayonet attacks, I guess, but not so great for utility purposes. So they finally clued in and they said, hey, you know, we can make a bayonet that's still effective in that role. If we shorten it though, we also get ourselves a combat knife, and therefore it's useful for the troops and doing a lot more other things besides, you know, bayonet charges. We can open up crates, dig with it, cut food, and all the myriad of tasks that we would call upon a field or combat knife to perform. So that brings us to the Glock design. The Glock is a modern rendition of a knife based on a knife-sized bayonet. In fact, the design is very reminiscent of the M6 or M7 bayonet used in the Vietnam War on the M16s. And this was prior to us upgrading to the M9 bayonet, which is more of a Bowie style blade. You've seen it. It's wider in shape, has a sweep of a Bowie, has a saw back on it. That's the M9 bayonet. And so this is kind of more similar to the earlier rifle bayonets of the 60s. Now, let's talk about this blade. It's 6.5 inches long, made out of spring steel, spring steel, tempered to 55 on the Rockwell scale. I have used this particular one fairly extensively. I find that it holds an edge adequately. It's not super hard. It is super tough. In fact, we can use them for throwing if we need to. They're fairly well balanced. You might even find some videos on that somewhere. But the spring steel is a tough, shock resistant steel that's very resilient to impact. And that's what you want, again, for a bayonet, which is going to a thrusting or spear type attack. Is you want a really tough steel. You want something brittle that's going to crack on you. And again, that's the ancestry of this Glock Field knife, is the bayonet, and so it inherits those qualities. And I think it's a good choice for the steel, actually. I've had really good experience with spring steel, not with just this knife. I had some friends make some out of car springs down in Alabama years ago, and those things were amazing. So spring steel is a very resilient and good steel for knife making, albeit it may not be the hardest and best edge holding steel. Now there are some limitations to this blade. Since its ancestry is the rifle bayonet, it's great for the thrust attack, and that's what it's pretty much designed for. There isn't a lot of belly on it. In fact, there's no belly until we come to the edge. It's basically straight edged. That straight long edge, along with a very narrow profile in this dimension here, does not make the Glock Field knife a good chopper. In fact, it sucks for chopping. That's a function of that narrow blade, the flat long edge, i.e. there's no sweep that will accelerate the cut, and also it's a function of its light weight. The knife itself is only 7.5 ounces in weight. That's light. The sheath only adds a 1.5. The whole package together is 9 ounces. Now that's all good. I love that. The lightweight, I prefer it. However, along with that lightweight and the blade designs, which I just mentioned, it's not a good chopper. A good example of this, let's say I'm preparing a log for processing to make fire out of, and I need to knock off the limbs on the periphery of the log, and I take this knife and I'm smacking it. Will it do the task? You bet it will. However, because it's lightweight and because it has a very narrow blade, it's going to transmit a lot of that shock to the handle and therefore my hand. So you do have a limitation in chopping with this knife. Not super great. Another limitation of the Glock design is because it's so narrow in profile, to get a good edge on it is tough, because that's such a steep angle that it has to go from. It's a 1/4 inch spine, and then when we come down and grind it, the way it comes from the factory is it's not sharp at all. The edge sucks on Glock knives. You have to do something with it, which I have done on all my Glock knives, as you see here. I've changed the geometry to be between 20, maybe 22 degrees by backing the grind up by my knife sharpener, whom you've seen a video of. And then I also sharpen that upper clip as well. And that makes the Glock knife outstanding, along with its chopping limitations. But once you get that edge on it, you're home free. As the edge comes, to me it's inadequate. I just don't like it. So, strong steel. It's not rust resistant. It's just a tool steel, so we're going to have to keep it oiled up. Not a huge deal in my experience. In rain or snow, just keep your rim oil handy and keep your blade lubed up. And if it gets stained, who cares? It's only a $25, $30 knife. Made in Austria is how mine are stamped. Glock Model 78 on the tang there. Really nice. Nice thickness. It does split wood fairly well too. I've split wood with it and have liked that. That brings us to the crossguard. It's kind of a vestige of the old bayonet design where we'd have a rifle attachment circle here. They've abbreviated this crossguard and bent it down for cap lifting, so we can open containers and pop bottles or whatever we got going with that, and I think there's a video or two showing that. Not by me, but someone else. It's a steel crossguard. It is effective in keeping our hands from coming forward in the thrust attack. Really nicely done. It's not too bad. Polymer grip is adequate. I like it. It's comfortable. It's long enough. It extends long enough. We can make a non-lethal impact with it if we needed to on the butt of it. I don't know if I'd be hammering anything tough with that butt. It's just polymer. And I don't think it's a full tang design, but I'm not positive on that. This is an olive drab color. Really good looking. I'll show you the other ones here in a sec. That brings us to the sheath. Really nice polymer sheath. It's tough, durable, snaps in with that nice authoritative click. Disadvantage of the sheath is it does take generally 2 hands to release the knife. So keep that in mind. Really nice clip that does lock on your belt and keep it in position. I love this clip. It's so nice. It's very effective. I've used it a lot. This brings to a Model 81. This is a serrated version. I haven't really used it a lot. I have tried the saw and it seems rather thick to be super effective, so I'm not a big fan of it. Again, this one's been reprofiled. There's the edge. Quick paper test. Ripped it last time, but it's razor sharp along with all my Glock knives. This is the same knife in black. Great knife, especially for the money. It's rugged, tough, durable, cool looking, great colors. As long as you understand the limitations, I think you'll be very pleased with any of the Glock knives. Thanks for watching.